A in Radical is concerned with architecture. And the first aspect to consider under architecture is the incredibly intimate relationship between the business strategy of a company and the system and software architecture of its offerings. Many people fail to understand the importance of these kind of things. So, for instance, in one of the companies that I worked with, there was a case where an engineer became involved in a standardization process in the context of home automation. The engineer went into the meetings, the standardization meetings, from a purely technical perspective. What would be the easiest APIs to define? What would be the best way to access the products that this company was building, etc., etc. The engineer, however, failed to recognize that standardization is as much a technical business strategy process as it is a technical process, because the way that you provide access to your devices, for instance, in a home automation context, will dictate whether you have control points for access to the products that you sell to your customers, or if you have no control points whatsoever, which often then leaves you to be one of the players that is basically forced to optimize for the lowest possible cost. Obviously, the other players, typically the big SaaS companies that went into the same standardization process, went in with a very clear business strategy, and they loved the notion of all the embedded systems companies simply opening up the kimono and offering all access to all aspects of their products. Another example that I've seen quite a few times is where system architects optimize the products for the lowest bill of material cost. The idea is, if I can save €1 in the material cost for a product, and I sell a million instances of that product, of course I've saved €1 million. So it's very rapidly worth our time and energy to focus on lowest bill of materials. However, in a world where we're moving increasingly towards DevOps and other approaches to provide continuous value delivery throughout the economic life of a product, focusing on the lowest bill of materials often also limits CPU, limits the size of the memory, as well as anything else that we need in order to be able to deliver additional value throughout the lifetime of the system. So what we then see is that there is a difference between the technology strategy, which is optimizing for lowest bill of materials, and a business strategy where we are looking to monetize around the product throughout its economic life. And obviously, the approach is that we need to find ways to create enough headroom in products by sacrificing some of the bill of materials, and instead allowing creating business opportunities for us to create revenue throughout the lifetime of the product. So I think that this is two examples that illustrate the tight interconnection between business strategy and software and systems strategy. And what many fail to recognize in this context, in my view, is at least that in practice, it is the system architects and the software architects in the company that set the real business strategy. The people on the business side may feel that they are setting the strategy, but in practice, if it is prohibitively expensive to pursue a certain business strategy, or it takes too long to realize the business strategy, it is not a viable approach for a company. And the only way you can avoid that situation is if the architects have predicted long enough before that certain business strategy options need to be developed and need to be realized. The main argument for this is that architectural design decisions, both on the system side and on the software side, often take a very long time to be implemented and be incorporated in the product or the product portfolio. So it simply needs quite a bit of time to have these architectural refactorings, which they often are, to realize these architectural design decisions, to have these architectural refactorings be worked through the backlog and realized in the system. And in my experience, for most companies, this will take anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So we need to, as architects, to start much earlier on realizing what is needed for implementing certain business strategy options than what many people on the business side actually realize. The other thing is that with all decisions that we make, architects and otherwise, we are in a situation where we need to predict what the likely outcome of these architectural design decisions will be. And often it is relatively easy to predict the technical impact of design decisions, but the impact on the business is often much harder to establish. So for architects, they really need to find ways to work and collaborate closely with the business in order to be able to sufficiently accurately predict where the business is most likely going. And this is where one of the reasons why I feel that agile is and the agile paradigm is a concern, because in agile, architecture is actually not one of the key concepts. And it's so architecture is so central and critical for business success, and it needs to receive continuous attention so you can continuously evolve the architecture, that I find that any product development paradigm needs to have architecture at its heart. Yeah. So even though the work architecture is heavily overloaded, um, many people fail to recognize that intimate connection between business strategy and technology strategy, and it requires close collaboration between business and architects in order to deliver on a aligned technology and business strategy. So if you're not seeing that, then you are actually setting yourself up for problems, because in the end, as Jim Rohn says, whatever we build ends up building us. So we have to be really careful that we build the right things so we can actually and end up in the place where we actually want to be.